Okay, everyone, looks like it's 6 p.m. We have 21 attendees and our 4 panelists here. Thanks so very much for being here. Want to introduce this event this evening, the town hall. We're going to do our very, very best to answer as many questions as we can, as many questions as we have answers to, for the North Santiam Canyon Wastewater Master Plan. And so this is on the engineering side. And then we'll also work through some questions that came in via email. And so if you could just be patient with us as we try to navigate that. This is being recorded, and so it'll be available at a future date on a YouTube channel. So that's been set up for the North Santiam Sewer Authority. So just want to introduce myself. My name is Danielle Gonzalez. I work for Marion County and I do economic development. Most of the work that I do has been up in the North Santiam Canyon for the last 5 years. We have McCrae Carmichael, and if you would please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is McCrae Carmichael and I work for the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments, and we are involved with the North Santiam project at this time for the engineering, this master plan scope, and helping with the project management of it. So, hi.
Great. Thank you. And then also introducing Ken Woodward. He is the chair of the North Santiam Sewer Authority. So Ken, please introduce yourself and tell them briefly how you've been involved with the project.
Briefly, huh? My name's Ken Woodward. I'm the chairperson for the North Santiam Sewer Authority. This project, I've been involved trying to acquire a sewer system for Detroit since 2011-12. I got involved with Marion County, Danielle Gonzalez in 2000, I think it was 15, our first meeting.
Maybe 15 or 16, yeah.
Yes. So anyway, been involved, interesting project, and it's been an honor to represent the city of Detroit.
Great, thank you. And Peter Olsen, he is with Keller Associates. They are the contracted engineer company to help us figure out the master plan. So Peter, I'm gonna let you take it over.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. So as she said, I'm Peter Olsen. I'm the project manager with Keller Associates, and we had the opportunity of starting with this project in 2016 with the feasibility study. And then we're had the opportunity to be selected to work on the master planning process here. Wanted to do a couple shop items here, just as we look, as I present the presentation that we prepared for tonight. The presentation is not the key focus, but we want to take questions and answer those questions. We have about 32 slides in the presentation, and I want to work through those fairly quickly, and not knowing and having that reaction in a webinar format. We'll work through those probably fairly quickly, and if you have questions or you say, put up the answer or the question and answer things, I want to look at that slide a little bit more, but as Danielle mentioned, this will be put on the YouTube channel and be able to be viewed and paused and look at slides and take your time there. So I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm sure there's a couple slides you're going to want to see a little bit more, and we want you to, and want to get your questions answered as well. So appreciate it. Bear with me as we kind of step through this, but let's get started. So we've already done the introductions. Staying informed. So this is a quick slide just to let you take a look at the website for the North Santiam Sewer Authority is there on the slide. Another way to stay informed and be involved is through the monthly board meeting. It's every first Thursday of the month from 6 to 8. We were holding those in person at the Mill City Hall and have had them by Zoom meetings, during the pandemic, and will continue in the foreseeable future until that is relieved. So that's welcome to anybody to attend and view and participate there. On the website, there's a lot of information, some frequently asked questions, schedules, things like that. A lot of the information that we're presenting tonight, you'll see some parallels with the Sewer Authority website. Background on the project. Gates, Detroit, and Indiana, they do not have community sanitary sewer systems. They have existing permitting challenges for septic and drain fields, and those are due to the small lot size. Some of the reasons that it's due to is small lot sizes, shallow groundwater, high precipitation. It rains a lot in the canyon, and they also can have unfavorable soil composition. Mill City has a STEP, which is a septic tank effluent pump system. It's a community sanitary sewer system, and it's a water pollution control facility permit. So it does not discharge to the Santiam River, the North Santiam River. They have 3 pump stations. Those were first built in 92, 93, and then they were rebuilt in 2008. There's a drain field that the wastewater, after it's treated, is discharged to the drain field and percolates into the ground through that. As I mentioned, it's about 28 years old, the entire system, and repair or upgrades are due. It's getting towards the end of its life cycle. Other second slide here for background. As I mentioned, 92, 93, the Mill City system was completed. And this is just a quick summary of, steps or attempts that have been made throughout the years. And I'm not going to regurgitate all this. I'm going to trust you all can read. There's always a temptation doing these presentations, just sit here and read those. But what this shows is that there's been a number of, I say attempts, but there's been studies, plans that have been put together and have not accomplished the end product for various reasons. Most recently, we're looking at here in 2015, we started the feasibility study, in 2017, we finished in January 2017, the feasibility study, which has now dovetailed into the wastewater master planning, which kicked off this last fall. Overall concepts of for the wastewater study.
Peter, I'm going to just remind you that there are going to be some people on the phone, so some of these you may actually have to talk through.
All right, fair enough. So the overall concept of the wastewater master plan is the elephant in the room, and the big subject here is the 3-basin rule. And the 3-basin rule essentially is you cannot discharge to the surface waters and increase the loading to the North Santiam River. This is a rule that has been in effect for decades and has limited the capability of to have a wastewater system that discharges to the surface water through typical permitting processes, and that meets requirements there. And because of that, this master plan has kind of a dual purpose. We coming up with a solution for the various communities that is compliant with the 3-basin rule, so it does not discharge to the North Santiam Sewer, North Santiam River, and then one that is non-3-basin, doesn't comply with the 3-basin rule, as if the 3-basin rule wasn't there. But important to note is that it does still have to meet the water quality requirements, the effluent, if they're doing reuse, the discharge method has to meet the effluent reuse requirements, biosolids requirements, all the design criteria, with the DEQ for pump stations, pipelines, treatment plants, whether it's surface or subsurface discharge. There are a lot of requirements. So it's just because the 3-basin rule wasn't there doesn't mean that there's not a lot of protections and limitations as far as the effluent discharge from the wastewater system. So that's the overall wastewater master plan concept. After this is done, there still needs to be facilities planning studies done that meet the DEQ guidelines and requirements. That gets down to the nitty-gritty, specific locations, specific plant, exactly how it's going to be sewered and treated and discharged. Have to work through funding, and then also have to work through permitting. And that's not only the discharge permitting, but the environmental and other types of permitting that's going to have to be required from various agencies other than the DEQ. Then the last part would be the design and construction of the wastewater treatment and collection systems. Bear with me just a second. Danielle, can you guys still hear me? My Bluetooth was chirping at me, so I apologize. Next slide. So the master planning. So the summary of our scope for this master planning process is here. You have task 1, project management, task 2, data collection, which is quite a robust process in any master plan. The task 3, Mill City Sewer System evaluation, which includes, capacity evaluation of the existing system, and then also putting a value to the existing system, and then also a business case scenario. Task 4 is the planning criteria, and we're going to talk about many of these, so I won't go into details, but task 5 is 3 basin rule outreach and regulatory interaction. Task 6 is collection system layouts. Task 7 is the wastewater treatment plant and disposal options. Task 8 is the actual draft and final master plan report. Task 9 is communication and public outreach, and task 10 is adoption of the master plan. The overall schedule for the wastewater master plan, this is in fall. We started with kickoff of the phase 1 and doing data collection. This winter, we're completing evaluations and establishing the planning criteria. And then this spring, we are completing the Mill City Sewer evaluation, the wastewater treatment plant investigation recommendations, and collection system recommendations. And then as we look towards summer, we'll be looking to complete and adopt the master plan. That goes along with most of the short-term goals there. As you can see on the screen, from 0 to 1 years, developing the master plan. And then the midterm 1 to 4 years, doing the facilities planning studies and other studies that are going to be required. Securing of and applications for permits, looking at the loans, grants, and fees to really essentially the funding. How's it going to be paid for? And then the long term and years 4 to 8 is the project prioritization and then design and construction of the systems. So for this master planning process so far, and we still have many to go, are project meetings. And this is just a quick summary of what those meetings look like. So there's been a lot of discussions, a lot of interaction with the Sewer Authority Board and a technical review committee comprised of stakeholders and board members. And we started back in August 2020 with the wastewater master planning process. We've had, in September, we had 2 different meetings for infiltration siting to look at potential sites and select sites that they would test for infiltration potential. And in November, we did some visits with the city of Mill City, looking at their system, talking with the operators. In January, we had results for the infiltration portion of the plan. And establishing the planning criteria, so the flows and the loading, and looking at potential treatment plant sites or starting that process. And in February right now, we're in the town hall meeting number 1 today, and then looking into early March, our TRC number 4 would look at the treatment and disposal options, and end of April would be providing those recommendations for the treatment and disposal.
And just remember, the TRC is the Technical Review Committee. And so when Peter's talking about the stakeholders, that includes members from the Oregon Association of Water Utilities, the City of Salem, a couple of people from the North Santiam Sewer Authority, the COG, Marion County as well. So there's a good mix of people on that Technical Advisory Review Committee, just to help make sure that we're looking through all of the possibilities.
Thank you, Danielle. And then in May, we're looking to have a second town hall meeting where we'll kind of circle back around and summarize the recommendations. So as far as digging into the work on the master plan, the first step in any planning process is the data collection. It's not intended for you to read everything on the screen here on the slide, and for those listening in, it's a document that lists all the items that we've requested, both from Mill City for their existing system to understand what it is, how it operates, what are the flows, and defining all those items, the criteria. Also from Gates, Detroit, and Indiana, requesting a lot of information, about their water system that we can learn, what is their water use and what might that look for wastewater flows. So there's quite a bit of process there. It started in August, as you can tell. That request was made. And unfortunately, we all understand what happened in Labor Day weekend, and it presents challenges in collecting data when that data may or may not exist anymore. And so we've worked with the communities to collect that data as the best we can, and so we can move forward. So the cities have been great to work with in that process, and understanding those, everyone understanding those challenges that we've had.
And of course, I would add in there, with those challenges, we met the Friday before the fires for some of the infiltration pieces. And that was a really effective and great meeting we had in Mill City that week. The documents that came out of there and the requests for informations that came out, of course, some of the cities were more impacted by the fires and lost records. And so with that, they've been able to pull in together what they had. And luckily, some of the records were elsewhere, and actually with Keller Associates from our feasibility study. So all of these things are now kind of building upon each other and helping each other along.
And the institutional knowledge of some of the operators has been very valuable to ground truth and understand what that data looks like. So we use that data, evaluate it, analyze it, pick it apart to then establish the planning criteria for the master plan. For the population, we start with the Portland State University population certified populations, as well as the projected populations. We use Sister's case study and help to formulate and put together proposed and projected average annual growth rate, AAGR, for our study. I'll show some slides here a little bit later what that looks like, but the other items as far as the planning criteria, something more typical items, environmental resources, looking at the TMDL is total maximum daily load for rivers that are established by the DEQ in the state. Water resources, looking at the floodplains, the wetlands, cultural resources, land use, biological resources, and socioeconomic conditions. All these are items that they will get further defined and frame the system as we look at the facilities planning study and the following steps in this in the overall project concept or project plan. Establishing the flows is a major part of the planning criteria, as that comes off of the population. So we get down to a flow per person. And we use Mill City's historic flows and then projected those forward based on the growth rate that we established. For Indiana, Detroit, and Gates, it's a little more challenging as we do not have existing systems to use flows for. But what we've done is use the winter water usage from each of those communities and have been able to convert those to dry weather flows, and then use peaking factors, looking at Mill City and other communities to establish those peaking factors to get to what the peak day or peak hour, peak instantaneous flows look like or could look like for those communities. And then one of the specific feedbacks we got from the technical review committee was looking at additional capacity for future industrial commercial users that will be accounted for in the flows. And then the raw wastewater loading is looked at very similarly for the flows. Mill City has historic loading. Something to note with the step system that Mill City has, it has really low loading. So the strength of the wastewater coming in is very low because most of the solids are kept back in the tanks, in the septic tanks, at the individual on the individual basis or individual lot basis. Because of that, it is tricky to convert those to gravity systems. So if the recommendation is to have a gravity system, then the loading is going to be a lot higher strength, have a lot higher loads coming in for Indiana, Detroit gates. And so we converted those to get those to be accurate and representative. Looking at the study area for the master plan, it was with the feasibility study, and it was established or decided to look at Mill City Gates, Detroit, and Indiana, but with the Lyons Mahama area as a potential future expansion opportunity. But for the start to look at Mill City Gates, Detroit, and Indiana only. As I mentioned, we looked at Sisters as a case study to inform us. It was not based solely on Sisters and what happened there, but is just over the mountain there. They installed a system around 2000 and saw a big growth increase higher than what PSU had projected, because PSU doesn't account for all things like this. So we used their data to help formulate what that growth rate might look like for the North Santiam Canyon with a community sewer system in each of these communities. Then we took that the growth rate that we had established, I had mentioned already, 1.6%, and applied that to each of the communities. And we looked at these on a basin. So Gates and Mill City would be combined, Detroit and Indiana. And for this part of the study, we did look at Lyons and Mahama and what that growth rate would look like. And then we combine them all to see the overall population and what that projects out to be. And you can kind of see the flatter portion, the light blue of the graph here is, that's what PSU's population projections would show. And this is what with the 1.6% growth rate would project out to be.
And I would like to point out one other piece, that when we were doing this augmented calculation for their planning criteria originally, this started with the feasibility study in 2016 and 17. The Detroit and Indiana number, we didn't expect it to go up very much. And it's still under what it was in the 70s. And so I think there was some question of whether or not the growth would be more than that. But I just want to point out that in that area, it was not expected to be more than what was there in the 70s already.
Thanks, Danielle. This is looking at that same planning criteria, but in a tabular format, essentially. So this is some of the details on the left here, and I believe you can see my cursor, the mouse there, but the historic flows for Mill City, what those design flows, and all these acronyms, we don't need to pick that apart here, but that's just a lot of different types of flows that we would use to design different parts of the system. The PIF, a peak instantaneous flow, the collection system has to be sized for that flow. And then maximum wet weather flow, that's a typical one used for treatment plants. So each one of these is used in a different way to design and plan for the community system. We took these design flows and then based on the population projections, increased those on this, gallons per capita per day flow, and projected those flows out to get, all the way out to 2065 and what that would look like. We did the same thing for Indiana, Gates, and Detroit. And this slide is just simply showing the historic flows based on water demands, systems, or the water system demands converted to wastewater flows. And that's a process I won't go into detail here, but if anybody ever wants to geek it up on that, I'm happy to oblige. Looking at again, this is the raw wastewater loading. Mill City actually this is what they experienced. And this is just other criteria that to design the treatment system. Well, we have to know what these values are. And this is BOD's biochemical oxygen demand. You have total suspended solids. And then this is a nitrogen. And I'm not going to try and pronounce the K part of that. I always mess that up. But it's just basically what a different way of measuring the loading coming into the wastewater treatment plant. And this is the same thing for Idanha Gates in Detroit. As I mentioned, converted to what that would look like with a higher strength loading without the step system. If the step system is what is ends up being the recommendation for the systems, these will be also need to be adjusted to show a much lower loading than what would be at the treatment plant for the gravity system. Next, looking at the collection system layouts, we've done some preliminary layouts, and we're looking at pipelines, lift stations, manholes, these types of things. And we're looking at what the slopes are. We're trying to avoid as many lift stations as possible to avoid increased costs. And as those that know the area, in this, everyone who's listening in or watching here would know that that's a challenge in some of these communities. Some of them, you get really steep slopes, and then other ones you get the slopes going the wrong way. So it's been the last couple of weeks we've been working on this. What we have is preliminary. Don't take any of this to the bank. Those they will be finalized. But I wanted, I feel fine giving people a sneak peek at what we're looking at. For Idanha, this is what it could look like. We have challenging areas down here close to the river where we're probably going to have grinder pumps to pull those properties up to the gravity system. We got 2 pump stations and then a potential treatment plant in this area. The yellow line is the force mains. So that's a pressurized pipe coming away from the pump stations, and they typically discharge into a manhole, which then flows continues on by gravity flow. This yellow force main here would be the one coming from Detroit to the Idanha system to be a combined treatment system. This depicts Detroit, what we're looking at there, and Detroit is a challenge, Ken. It is a challenge. This is not news to you, I'm sure. But ended up being what we got away with is needing 4 different pump stations. And I will mention, if it does go to the recommendation is for a step system, this becomes a lot simpler, I would say, maybe less challenging, because the step systems are all pressurized mains. And so those can all be installed at 4 feet below the surface, and we don't have to worry about the topography. It's a lot simpler and easier to work with. But these are all gravity. The system, the gravity system would be a lot more challenging. So this is what we're trying to depict of what that might look like to sewer the city of Detroit here. For the city of Gates, again, there's a little bit of challenges, and one thing that we're trying to avoid is getting these pipelines too deep as well. We know there's rock, we know there's boulders at shallow depths all throughout the canyon. Keeping these as shallow as possible, but with enough cover, that's the challenge that we're looking at when we're laying out these collection systems. Gates, we're looking at 4 different pump stations. And 1 pump station will take it and send the flow out from the city of Gates towards the city of Mill City. That's what this force main going south on Gates, I think it's still Gates School Road at that point, going up the hill and out of the river valley there. City of Mill City is existing. So this really just depicts, this is the existing system except for the line coming from the east here from Gates. It's in a potential alignment. Again, don't take that to the bank. But what we're saying is that's a potential alignment for bringing in the force main, the pressurized flow from Gates to get it. And this is a potential treatment plant site. And it's only the potential site because that's where the existing plant is. And so for our purposes in our presentation today, that it was best to leave it at that location. Next, so we talked about collection system. Now let's talk about potential treatment plant sites. And my purpose is not to share information on all these different sites, but just to give you a flavor of what we're looking at and how we're looking at it. We've looked at all these sites. We've talked with the Sewer Authority Board. We've talked with the Technical Review Committee to get their insight, their input, what works, what doesn't. And then we've got a whole matrix of pros and cons of different locations. And it doesn't mean that one that's not here couldn't be here, but it helps us to put a frame of reference on it and then narrow that down and make some recommendations. And you can see some of these have like the entire, this rock, what we're calling the Rock Creek site. We don't need the entire site. We don't want to go down close to the river over here and get in the floodplain, but we're looking at anywhere from 3 to 6 acres of property to be able to develop into a treatment plant facility. What you can see on here is you have the floodplain depicted on here on this figure, as well as the wetlands inventory. So that's Gates Mill City. This is the Idana area. Looking at a couple different properties and locations. And then Detroit, we are showing a couple potential. And as I said, these are not the locations where it's going to be, but we are evaluating and looking at these as potential.
And with that one, you know, there was also some talk about when we talked about expanding service possibly in the future. The Forest Service has shown a lot of interest, as well as the state parks. So we are trying to, you know, add all of their potential needs down the road into the plans, but without us actually increasing the cost for the local people. So just kind of know that that's in the back of our heads when we're doing some of this planning as well.
Thanks, Danielle. Next, so we've talked about the collection, the treatment, and then looking at disposal. And as far as disposal oh, my keys did not work there. There we go. For disposal by infiltration, so an infiltration site, we worked with GSI Water Solutions to go through quite the process of looking at different areas of the canyon, areas of the cities, and looking at what the soils look like. We went through quite a lengthy process of narrowing that down and selecting 4 locations that they could do some physical testing and do infiltration testing. They completed that work and then provided a final memo of, you know, recommendations, what those, you know, the estimated permeability and more importantly, the volumes of water that they anticipate it could hold. Would it, you know, hold enough volume? So it's not just the infiltration rate and how quick it goes down, but can the groundwater or the substrate handle that much volume on a regular basis? So I'm not the expert there, but hopefully I explained that well. Matt Kohlbecker, and he's been a valuable resource there in looking at that. The results and recommendations, one is we need to, I'll summarize, looking at Gates Mill City area, it's promising to have an infiltration facility. It looks good. The soils are you know, may work with us and be able to do that. In the Detroit Idana area, it's the, you know, the opposite story. It's a lot more challenging and does not look as promising for an infiltration facility. So that's kind of the short summary of that. The recommendations from Matt and his team at GSI was, you know, engaging with the DEQ, obviously, to look at the groundwater quality and do more, the property selection and doing a site-specific drilling program to look at those site-specific factors when we're looking at a specific site to make sure that it'll work. So there's more testing, more evaluations, analysis, and showing that is going to meet all the groundwater quality requirements and be permittable by the DEQ. And that site-specific factors will help refine those. I talked about the volumes and reduce uncertainties associated with the specific site that is selected. Three basin rule and our direct stakeholder engagement. This is obviously one of a larger challenge with the master planning process. We have meetings that we're holding with the stakeholders. That includes, county, downstream cities, specifically the city of Salem, and state legislators, and having conversations with the Oregon DEQ. And I recognize that, this is a challenge for the DEQ as well in their process and working with us, but they've been good to work with so far, and educating and help us understand what they can and can't, how things are interpreted, and looking at the three basin rule. So that's appreciated, and there's a lot more to discuss and work on with the DEQ as we move forward in the overall process.
Yeah, and if I can add something on that, Peter, with the stakeholders, of course, the three basin rule, it impacts the ability for us to do the infiltration or discharge. And so the city of Salem and Staten and a few others, city of Gates also gets their water from the North Santiam River. The downstream cities of, Salem in particular, we had a conversation with them in December, sat down with Steve Powers, the city manager there, as well as one of their wastewater engineers, Jason Pulley. He is actually on our technical review committee. And so we've had those conversations. They were promising conversations in December. The conversation specifically, I identified that their concerns were more below the dam and not above the dam. And then, of course, making sure that their concerns are part of our discussion points all the way through. So we're in a promising place. So we're hoping that we can just keep moving those positive communications. So there you go.
Thanks, Danielle. And part of our scope includes draft permit applications, that just so we can give the board and others looking at, an idea of what those will look like. And that's for both the surface water discharge, if there wasn't a three basin rule, and then the indirect discharge, so either land application or the subsurface discharge from a water pollution control facility. Another aspect of our scope is looking at the Mill City's existing sewer system and evaluating it. As I mentioned in November, we visited the city, visited with staff, interviewed them, and visited the facilities, and have done an evaluation and analysis of the capacity based on their data and what they call the DMR, the discharge monitoring reports. What we're seeing in the results there, the short summary is that they're looking at about 94% of capacity. They're at 94% of the capacity of the existing treatment plant there. We'll have recommendations for short-term improvements, and that includes both the short-lived asset replacement. What that means is, valves, stuff that have a 5, 10, 15-year lifespan that need to be replaced. They either well over their life, expected life, or they will be. So there's a number of valves and items, electrical, that need to be replaced. And looking at what will it take to increase the capacity to get through some kind of short-term capacity increase. So those will be included in the recommendations with the master plan. And then probably more important, but equally important, is the valuation. So what's the value of the Mill City's existing system? The city has invested, obviously, since it was built, when it was built until now, and their existing system have a lot of valuable infrastructure there. So we're putting a value to that, which also feeds into what we're calling a business case scenario. And so the system is currently owned by Mill City, and the sewer authority would be looking to take over ownership. What does that look like? So we're looking to put some better information to help both entities to be able to negotiate and come to an agreement there. That's the end product of what that business case scenario is to provide the necessary information to help the two entities do that. As we look ahead, I had mentioned in the kind of schedule for the master planning process, we've got the next TRC meeting. We have 2 more TRC meetings, and then the draft master plan report. And we have another town hall. I think that actually has the end of April. It's actually May. I apologize for that typo that I put in there. And then the final master plan, we're looking towards July. So the summertime for the final master plan. And then obviously continuing the 3 basin rule, direct stakeholder engagement, important and vital aspect of it all. Post master planning, as I mentioned previously, we're looking at the facilities planning studies, funding acquisition, permitting, and then doing the design and construction. The funding, permitting, there's a lot of subtopics there. So there's a lot to be done after the master plan. Well, I think I've got through that, the presentation. And so this is just information of the website and the board meeting, similar to what we showed at the very beginning of the presentation. So we've gone full circle. And it looks like we do have a couple questions in the Q&A. Danielle McRae, if you want to kind of MC that.
Yeah, I'll help you along the way. So we're going to try to do the engineering ones that have come up so far. And I would just also suggest anybody, use the chat feature to put in if you have engineering questions. There was a question that was posted about a specific system that a Renko system. And Peter, can you kind of give us an idea of, I know you're familiar with some of these, what those systems and how far into the process would we start looking at those?
Yeah, so the Renko system is one of the step style systems. Dell, it's we actually were talking with Renko specifically last week and gathering data and information and cost estimates and all those sorts. Those will factor in as one of the options to analyze in a life cycle cost to see if the step system is better than a gravity system in the long term. So we're not looking at just capital cost, upfront cost, but we're looking at operation, maintenance, replacement as you go throughout the life of the system. Some of your comments there that I'm seeing real quick, need to be, you can install it pretty quickly, but then also permitting is very important. Where there's no way we're going to get a permit within 8 months, to be able to have this and permitted and also an infiltration facility where it can all go to. So those systems, you are correct, they can be installed very quickly, and they're good systems. It's a matter of the planning and the permitting and more importantly, the discharge mechanism. Whether it's going to be infiltration, it's going to take a process to work through to get to the point where that would be potentially be approved.
Nice, thank you. And another question came up, assuming that the Gates Mill City system could be built with fewer issues like the DEQ permits and all of that, could a Gates Mill City half of the project continue forward while the details between Detroit and Idana portion are still ironed out?
I would say definitely there's a potential to have that phased, and so that the Gates Mill City phase of the project could move forward, and while Detroit and Idana are being worked on. I think that's something that has potential to be worked out, but I will say we got to work with DEQ, we got to work with all the other regulatory agencies and make that work, and importantly the funding, make sure it's going to be paid for. So
okay, thank you. If you'll hold tight with me half a second, I need to get to my other screen to get the questions that we had emailed into us. Okay. So this is a series of questions. A person has a property in Detroit. They lost their full-time residents in the fire. They have an Advantex septic system. They've had some damage and a repair estimate of between $6,000 to $7,000. And they do want to rebuild this spring. They want to know what they're going to need to do to transfer for the existing system to a new sewer system. I'll try to do my best to answer a couple of these. So I'm going to read through them real quick, and then I'll answer as many as I can. What will the costs and responsibilities be? Will the old system have to be removed? Will a new tank, or will there need to be a new tank? Is there a hookup fee? They previously paid $20,000 for their system. They're, with the investment that they're going to have to make, they want to make sure that they know what to expect. So I'll do my best to answer those. Right now, we don't know what the transferring of the existing system is because we don't know what type of new system will be there. We're still working out the basics on this for the cost and responsibilities. So the cost, and this is the way the costs are calculated for user fees. A lot of the federal and state agencies that help with the funding, their evaluation helps to look at what is the median household income of the communities that's being served. And with those communities, with the median household income, there is a percentage that is what is considered affordable. Between 1.2 and 1.4% is traditionally looked at what is affordable. And so the work that we're doing, and this is something we haven't even talked about yet, we're going to have to do some income surveys. We're going to have to do a lot more pieces to be able to evaluate what the median household income is. And we don't know how that's going to change also with the fires and who returns back and what their income levels are going to be. And so that is going to be a heavy lift for us as well. We've already started having conversations with entities that are willing to help us with a survey like that, an income and population survey. And that all those data pieces will then help to add more information to the affordability rating. So if that makes sense, I'm gonna look around at anybody else had that makes sense. Okay. And then will there need to be a new tank or a tank hookup fee? The North Santiam Sewer Authority will have to look at that in the future. We will not really know what that cost looks like until we get the design and know what we need and how much money and funding we can get. But again, it has to fall into that affordability rating. Otherwise, the system would be unlikely to be paid for. When we did the feasibility study early on, we put together a very just large estimates and then used the median household incomes that were available to us from the 2015 and 16 timeframe. Those numbers obviously will go up. And since the income levels will likely go up, then obviously the cost of this. For us, the cost really never goes down because the income level will continue to go up. If that makes sense, and I'll happily answer other questions on that one if there's more later, and we can do it offline as well. Is there a hookup fee? The North Santiam Sewer Authority is going to have to make that decision down the road. Traditionally, a hookup fee can be anywhere from $1,000 and to a couple thousand. There has been discussions of, if the communities can't afford that, what would that look like? But it's so early for us to make that, to start talking those without actually having numbers. It would be premature. So that's all I have to say on that one right now. It says, does everybody have to hook up to the system again? The North Santiam Sewer Authority is going to have to make that decision. These are all going to happen during public meetings as well, and with significant input. We've had discussions around the table with the people that are in the room and have been in the room for the last year, have not really wanted to force people to hook up. When Mill City, my understanding is when Mill City did that in the 90s, when they put their system in, they ended up only having a handful of people that didn't hook up. And then those people then had to pay for an additional hookup fee later when they were ready to do that, and it was much higher. So nobody around the table has said that they want to do that, but really the sewer authority has to look at what all of those numbers look like down the road. One of the other questions is I see the cost is projected to be $50 to $55 per month for user fees. Again, those numbers are going to fluctuate until we can actually get down what the median household income is and what our financing, funding, financing, and loans, grants, and direct appropriations. And then is there going to be a firm cost attached for monthly fees soon? I can tell you for sure it won't be in the next year. I'm assuming, Peter, that we will not have the numbers in the next year. So please plan accordingly, that we won't have that information for quite some more time. And this process, of course, just there's so many pieces to it. What is a realistic date of completion of the system? And this I'm actually going to send to you, Peter, to help us. Rough guesstimation. People are trying to make life decisions on, if they're building back and how they're building back.
Yeah, I think what we have on the website there, that 4 to 8 years, that's what we're looking at. And it all depends on permitting, funding, and how all that lines up. The permitting is a challenge, and will need to be worked through. But as I mentioned, there's all the items, even without the 3-basin rule. There's permitting is a challenge, and will require a lot of testing and analysis and working with the DEQ through their mechanisms to make that happen.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And so another question is the minutes for the North Santiam Sewer Authority referenced sewer lateral rules or new permitting rules. Says that I don't want another agency adding additional rules or hoops to jump through. Yes, I think the conversation around the table has been exactly that. The conversation was also about if people had insurance. Sometimes insurance carriers will pay for the additional changes in legislation or in ordinances, so you're up to par. That's the reason we had that discussion. As of right now, we don't have any sewer system to actually build laterals to. So if people are building back, they would probably just do it the way that they were planning on doing it before with a septic system if they're able to. Peter, do we have any idea roughly when we would know the line? Are we talking July, we think, with a master plan? Do you think that's when we would know a little bit more?
I think we'll have the best idea then, because what it depends on, like I had mentioned, is the whether you go with a step system or a gravity system. That could change some of the alignments, but what you saw today there, if it's a gravity system, that's pretty darn close. What was presented today.
Yeah. And there was one thing that was suggested by the Oregon Association of Water Utilities. They were making suggestions that if people wanted to plumb their houses for a sewer system, that might be helpful, but there's no requirement at this point. So just throwing that out there.
Hey, Danielle, I can address another question about comment really about the Energy Trust of Oregon being able to provide some potential help and support there for energy costs. Energy costs are one of the larger costs for any utility system when you have to move water in the direction that does not involve gravity. That's one of the larger costs, as well as chemical and then staffing. Those are typically your higher costs. And so, Dale, you have a great comment there about Energy Trust of Oregon. I would love to work with them and get as much, sustainable type energy there as we can. Typically, that comes with a higher capital cost. Energy Trust, may have some programs that can be, capitalized on, no pun intended, to lower the capital cost. And so we will be looking at those and trying to involve them in that process.
And they've actually already reached out. Peter, I haven't even had a chance to tell you that, but they have reached out. And so we talked about, what we need to do to put in play now that would help the energy efficiency down the road. And so they're all game. Yeah. So they're happy to do that. Our
typical designs have, high efficiency pumps and nowadays with, a lot more modern equipment, that's typically the case. But what you're mentioning here, Dale, with like solar energy and things like that, definitely, if those can be incorporated and help out with long-term energy costs, exactly. Amen. I think that's a great idea, and would be looked at in the design process.
Great. And I mean, of course, the goal is to try to make it as affordable as possible with the highest, quality of water that we can get. And then the last question on this series was, if a new sewer authority is made up of volunteers and paid employee to operate, there's a concern on the expertise of people that would be working through that to make the rules and decisions. Says, I appreciate the work that group's done for the community, but would prefer to be hooked up into a new and would be preferred to hook up into a new system, but have a huge amount invested in the current system. And the thought of abandoning and then paying for a possible removal is a lot. So for the management, what the plan is to hire staffing for the North Santiam Sewer Authority. Marion County is not going to be the staff forever, but we have been working very, very closely, probably for the last at least 4 years, with the Oregon Association of Water Utilities, as well as the Special Districts Association of Oregon. And they have all offered to help add expertise in places where we don't necessarily have it yet. And then it'll give an opportunity for Marion County then to switch to some other projects down the road. But we are looking at potential staffing, professional staffing for the North Santiam Sewer Authority, and then also for the technical. Peter's going to end up having to help us look through and what kind of staffing we would need on the technical and the geotechnical side.
Yep. And the staffing, I will say, also depends on what type of system you end up with your treatment. The certification levels, depend on what that, the level of treatment.
Okay, let me go back through these questions here and make sure we've answered everything here. Okay, so there was lots of questions about when this will be posted. We are currently live on Facebook on the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments website, Facebook site. That can be forwarded around to people. We've just set up a YouTube channel, and literally I set it up about an hour and a half ago or a couple hours ago. So it's still pretty new. It needs to do some work, but then we're going to upload this to a YouTube channel that will allow to link directly from the North Santiam Sewer website. So if that helps. So yes, we're trying to reach out, not just on Facebook, not just on Zoom, but any which way we can. So appreciate that. And we will be posting it as soon. It just takes a little bit of time to upload all of these things. So just hang tight. We'll try to have it in the next couple of days out there. Okay, so that was a question about posting it. Are you prepared to talk about how this will affect the individual homeowners? If so, how they rebuild? Should we be constructing stubs into the street? Would that reduce the future connection fees? Will the fees be flat rated? What are we looking at for monthly fees? So I'm going to just go back to what we previously said about the construction of stubs to the street. I mean, at this point, we're not far enough along to give advisement on that, and there's no requirement. So I just wanted to throw that out there. If you're going to be rebuilding, just go do what you need to do. We're going to try to walk through these steps methodically and with public input from the local communities and get some direction from our local communities on how they want to attack that. Would it reduce future connection fees? We just can't answer that at this point. I think for these questions, I think we're probably about 18 months from these questions. I'm looking at Peter to about 18 months before we can really start talking about those things.
Which one is it? I was looking at some of the chat. I apologize. I was looking at the chat trying to answer a future question here.
Thank you. The construction stubs and connection fees and all that, we really can't even look at that for at least another 18 months in my head.
At least.
Yeah. So if that gives it some time frame. So you'll have to make decisions, unfortunately, in your rebuilding. And, of course, this fire really has just thrown everything awry on that. And when we're projecting the fees, when we did the initial feasibility and then when we did the initial financial projections, we did conservative estimates based on how much debt the community, the sewer authority could take on. and what would be best, and calculate it out with the median household income to see if it was even possible to make it happen. With the help of many different agencies coming together, giving us information, we felt comfortable that there was a pathway forward for affording this project. But that being said, it has to have a high amount of grant, direct appropriations, and low interest funding. And so that's what we're starting to chase now. If anybody wants to help, we need people to help write grant applications. And, you know, this is the way we all make it as cheap as possible, is by getting as much of it out in grants or direct appropriations. Got another one from Mary Ann. It says, in consideration of this project completion timeline, may I request the Sewer Authority support of a request to rebuild grace period window for wildfire victims. Wildfire loss, property owners need to have option to rebuild after the sewer system's in place instead of repairing existing systems. I know that the state has already made some delays, and McCrae, can you talk to, do you remember how long they have to rebuild currently?
Yeah, there's different provisions in different communities. You know, it first is going to depend on your sewer, your septic system being the septic authorization happening and it being checked, and you being able to tie into it. But the ability to rebuild up in Detroit and Gates as you were essentially, like on your foundation or where you were, is 4 to 5 years for each different city. So the timing of this project alongside that, that's about the same time, potentially, right? I mean, but if you're dealing right now with your permitting questions, that's already here. We're not, if you're thinking about building in the next year and getting back up there, you're going to be tying back into your septic system.
Thank you very much. And McCrae's actually been helping the cities of Gates and Detroit with some of those rebuilding questions of, you know, how do you get your permits and all that kind of good stuff. So, so I appreciate your help on that one. Don sent in a request. Funding approval typically results in expediting. Is there any reason to believe the state of Oregon would be willing or eager to contribute emergency funding based on the wildfire designation in the canyon? Many compromised septic systems and small lots are incapable of supporting the septic's field. Yes, and those conversations have been very moving along very, very quickly. Just yesterday, I believe it was, the governor did tell the county that there is money in her budget request that's going out for a portion of this project. I don't know if it was 10 million or more. So we're going to keep following up on that and working through that process. But there is already discussion of how we build this. I've said it, unfortunately, I was quoted in the paper saying that we're going to Frankenstein stitch money together, but that's the reality, right? That all of these different pieces of funding will have to come together, and then we'll have to layer those along with the phasing that is recommended through the engineering and design. So yes. What the complication is not just the funding, it's the permitting and all of that as well. So those have to kind of happen at the same time. There's cultural studies that need to happen for cultural resources that have to happen. There's anytime you have a project that you're getting federal dollars for, that's more than $10 million. You actually have to go and do a value engineering work. So you have to have another engineering company come in and review all of the work to see if it's still a financial benefit. There are, again, we talked about the fact that we have to do the studies for the population and housing. there's so many pieces to this that, you know, I think that even if we had the money today to start moving stuff, we can only do that once we get the permits in hand. And there's a lot of pieces to ensure that we're helping to keep the water quality high. So that's a responsibility that we have. Okay, so I'm going to keep going down. How complete is the information about the existing septic systems, utilities, and property boundaries? Ooh, that's a good one. Peter, can you help me out with that one?
Oh, the existing septic systems is a county health issue, and what all those look like. I mean, we that's not part of our data analysis, but and so what the county has as far as record keeping or anything like that, I couldn't say there. As far as the property lines and things like that, I mean, that's part of the design process is doing a survey, boundary survey, understanding where the properties are and the right of way and all that. So we have different sources of looking at that, but until you get to the design, you don't need to get it that detailed. So.
And I would say that the property boundaries right now are a little bit, it's a difficult situation because some of the property boundaries were based on, what's the word I'm looking for, McCrae? Things that no longer exist, like say in Detroit, right? They were like the way that they were written out. And so detailed surveys will need to happen. So government corners are being reevaluated and put into GIS mapping. Some of that hadn't been done in the past with the GIS mapping. And so those things are also needing to happen for a lot of people actually with their surveys now. So how complete is the information? Not very complete yet. I know that there were studies in the past of the septic systems and the failure rates and all of that kind of stuff. I believe, and Ken, I'm looking at you, in Detroit and Idana, what percentage did the ODEQ report say? And this was what year?
2000, 2003, the DEQ, and it was a high percentage for failure. But I can't give you the exact number.
Yeah, so that is available. We'll have to pull it up and find a way to get that information out as well.
I think
so that
McCrae has my study.
I know it's been bouncing around all of our desks. So that's all the questions I have in the chat. Let me double check to see if there's anything else. Okay, so here, will each city have the same sewer rate? Some cities may have wealthier residents. So great question. I'll do my best to answer it. Yes, some cities might actually have a higher income, but the benefit, each one of the cities benefits in a different way from this project. So while some cities might have a higher income, they may not have the location to put a component on it. So I use Idana as an example. I said, this is why Idana is everybody's best friend. Because Idana's income level is lower, significantly lower than the other communities, it actually benefits all of the communities because it's based on the whole sewer authority footprint. And so that includes, again, Mill City, Gates, Detroit, and Idana. So because the income level is there, places like Detroit and Mill City, and even Gates, surprisingly enough, Gates, their income level, the last time it was reported, was way higher than it probably should have been. So it just means that nobody's responding to the American Community Surveys and the census. So because Idana's income is low, if you look at it from the entire perspective, it actually lowers the median household income for everyone. And so it makes it more affordable for everyone. So I would throw that out there. It's actually, you get beneficial loan rates and all of that, the lower income the community is. And then there was another piece about the Renko system. I know you're working through that, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer some of those. I mean, we've been talking with the Renko specifically. So John, I believe those are your comments. It was inaccurately attributed to Dale. Unfortunately with Zoom for some reason. Yeah, we're talking with the folks there at Renko. They're local, they're Oregon. I mean, they're a good outfit. I would, you know, they are salespeople as well, you know, and so we're getting that third party data to evaluate that independent of any kind of sales. And I'm not saying they're a bad system by all means. They have good products. So looking at that, and then that goes along with the next one about lower cost of operation and then for a traditional or step system. They can have aspects that are lower, but then also higher. I mean, every single system has a pump, and any moving parts have to be maintained and taken care of. No matter how well they're made, at some point they're gonna have to be taken care of and maintained and replaced. And so those are all factors that we're looking at, and that's why doing the life cycle cost analysis that we're going to be doing is important to look at the whole picture as opposed to just one aspect of it. So good comments, John, and we're looking at all those, and I've taken note of all these comments that you have here. So
Yeah, and that's very true. And Peter, help me out. If I know on certain types of septic systems now, there's annual requirements, right? And so that's when you're talking about that life cycle cost, that there's an annual contract that must be maintained. Would a scenario, would a contract have to be maintained with all of these? That's what falls into the life cycle cost. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, yeah, and you have power costs at every single location, and who pays for that? Is it the resident? Is it the sewer authority? What happens when the power goes down? And you know, they have built-in systems and, you know, extra capacity, and there's lots of ways to work with that. But those are all aspects that we're looking at and incorporating into the analysis. So
Yeah. And then this is the last one I'm seeing right now, so please put in more questions if you have them. Happy to try to answer. Sorry you just joined. The question might have already been asked, but we're planning to build in the next year to 2 years. What can we or should we do with our current sewer system in order to prepare for a hookup for a future city sewer system? Yes, we've tried to answer this best we can. Unfortunately, we won't know what that looks like. The one recommendation that was made by one of the staff members of the Oregon Association of Water Utilities was to, you know, if you are rebuilding, to maybe plumb your house so it's ready for sewer. That was really the extent of the recommendation that they made at this point. But because we don't have the full design done, it would not be best for us to make any recommendations, and there is no requirements as of right now from the North Santiam Sewer Authority. So if that helps. And then another question, John McCormick, will we be able to get feedback on the relative costs of the various types of systems as the engineers exam? Yes. This will all go back into a lot of our public meetings with the North Santiam Sewer Authority. Will have to be decision making. And then we have some subcommittees. Again, it might be under the technical review. It might be a subcommittee under the North Santiam Sewer Authority to actually choose systems in the future. That approach hasn't been looked at yet. So let's see. There are more questions coming in. We still have 40 participants on the line, so that means that people are still hanging in there. And we want to be able to answer more questions. How do I officially request this letter of support to present to the city of Gates and Detroit? We're going to look at this a little bit further and figure out. I'm pressing things while I'm talking. Sorry, guys. We're going to have to look at this further, Marianne, and I'm going to ask Ken and McCrae to help me figure out what we need to do to answer Marianne's question on this. Because really what it comes down to is the timeline, and is there more time, and would the sewer authority be willing to help keep advocating for it? I will tell you that I know the county has been advocating for exactly what you're asking for. I've been in those calls, so I know for sure.
We have someone who's raised their hand.
Great.
Rick, let's see. Rick, are you able?
Marmon.
Yeah, Rick.
Do we have to unmute him or is?
Yeah, we have to allow him to talk.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a mistake. That was a mistake.
Oh,
Okay.
that's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the questions you're responding to.
Yep, I just lowered your hand for you, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So are there more questions that we can answer at this point? So I'm going to just kind of talk through a little bit of what's going to happen, what kind of is still on the roster of things to do. We have just about 15 more minutes. So McCrae, stop me if somebody asks another question along the way.
Mhm.
So what the North Santiam Sewer Authority, just to kind of give some basic ground rules of what we've done. The Sewer Authority was formed in May of 2020. And it is formed with 2 members that are appointed by each city involved in the intergovernmental agreement. So that is Mill City, Gates, Detroit, and Idana. What we need to be working through, and this is what we've worked through so far. In 2015, we did a feasibility study that started and we finished it in 2017. Keller was the engineer on that particular feasibility study, which has been beneficial in this scenario because of some of the data that was lacking from after the fires. At the time, we also did a commercial and industrial lands inventory, and that's where we did the augmented population estimates and land and job estimates. So we did that as well at the same time and finished up in 2017. We started working with the Oregon Health Authority about a health impact report. Some draft memos kind of came out on that, but it was not ever completed. There was an economic value report of the North Santiam River that was a combined effort with the North Santiam North Santiam Watershed Council, as well as the Water Control District, the Santiam Water Control District, the City of Salem, and Marion County, and the Oregon Business Business Council, excuse me. That actually put an economic value of the high quality of the water in the North Santiam River, and really gives us a good reason on why the investment's important. That value report came out and said that the North Santiam River is valued at about $170 million a year from all of the different uses that can be calculated economically. The North Santiam Sewer Authority again went ahead and became an authority in 2020, so May. And so we are now working on the organizational development. And what that means is that, you know, we have to do some basic things, right? We've done our ethics training, we've done our board leadership elections, we've done our logo developments, we've done registering our organization. We've identified some funding for some organizational development pieces. But now we've got to look at how do we draft the scope and hire a manager, and how do we look at what the budget would look like just for the public entity laws and compliance and all of those pieces. So that's happening. The North Santiam Sewer Master Plan, you see that we're in the middle of that. There's facility property assets that we have to look at. And it might be having to purchase properties. It might be having to lease properties. Those all are going to happen as well. We're going to have to negotiate with the Mill City on their assets, as Peter said earlier. We're going to have to look at potential land use exclusion and zoning changes because some of the locations that we're looking at are outside of the urban growth boundary. We're going to have to do that income and population survey, a cultural resources review, and that might be a phase 1, or it might go deeper if there's something found there. And we need to look at a water reclamation and recycled water plan for cost recovery. And we haven't really talked a lot about that yet. but it is something that we're thinking about. It's on the back burner for now. Once we figure out what type of system, then we're going to figure out what we have to do with the water. And then the water as a commodity might be able to find us some new revenue sources. And so trying to think creatively on how we can reuse the water that we create and how do we get there. And then what we talked about is that full geotechnical engineering, which is more the detailed work, as well as that value engineering study. We obviously have to work through our financing, which is grants, direct appropriations from federal, state, and local governments, as well as loans or bonds. This North Santiam Sewer Authority cannot, by their formation, actually get taxes. And so because of that, they can only do revenue bonds. And so that's based on, something down the road of what you're earning. So just based on user fees. Then obviously we're going through the permitting, and that process is we're working through those processes now before we can get to a construction project. While
So
we're doing,
Danielle,
yes.
no, excuse me. I just wanted to share, there's questions about citizen involvement in the process and the project that have come up. So if you want to dovetail with that.
Yes, thank you. Let me just one more piece on that. With all of these pieces, that if you put those next to each other, it's a long process. We're trying to collapse the timeline as much as possible, but also get what we need for the long-term stability and financial security. So just know that all of those pieces are there. So there is a question in how we can, citizens in the city and the canyon, help get involved, help with the project. Thank you for asking that. Yes, we have our North Santiam Sewer Authority meeting every month. Right now it's been on Zoom. We can't wait to get back together in the same room. But right now it's on Zoom. Those are the first Thursday of the month from 6 to 8 p.m. And we try to stay honest to that time frame. We just try not to go over. There's ways that citizens can get involved. Everything from, we're going to need some people to talk to legislators. We're going to need people to write letters at some point. We're going to need people to help write grant applications. You'd be surprised how many things you have to write out for talking points and things like that. We have places where people can help. We're currently in the middle of drawing up our policies and procedures for our internal organization. So that's moving along. We've got a person that's helping with the budget pieces. So there's lots of different places. Tell us what your expertise is, and we want to get you involved. We've had wonderful people over the years that I promise you, when this first started, there were lots of tough faces in the room and not necessarily wanting to move forward. And Ken's laughing because he was there with us as these started. But, talking through all of these things, the four cities were not sitting down in the same room all the time. And now you guys are kind of leaning on each other, especially after all of these disasters. So I think that's a good thing. And then John McCormick's asking, what can we do to help? Same thing. You guys are awesome. Grant writing is a huge, big piece. We're going to be hiring somebody, but we're still going to need someone to pull in data that you can hire somebody to write grants. But the reality is there's only so many people that know about the community to give the story. And that's really, really important. And then the last question I think John had is, how do we speed up this process? Honestly, the funding pieces at the right time are going to be extraordinarily important. The county has already put in over 500,000, I believe it is. The whole project's been over $668,000 to date. We're looking for the county I've put in a request to the county for the commissioners to approve a budget for next year that will give us the funds that we need for the next coming year. And then we're going to be working closely with state and federal entities to find where they can fit in those holes. And there will also be philanthropists that want to help with the help through this process. And so those would be grant applications that we would also have to do. And then how is the North Santiam Sewer Authority fixed for funding for current needs? Thank you for asking. I actually just got notice today that we will have some additional funding in this current fiscal year for the county. That means before July 1, we will have another, I think it's going to be 150,000 to start with those operations and start hiring people and getting some additional things done. Silly things like who knew you need letterhead, right? So that's what happens when you start a brand new government. So that's what I can answer for now. Is there anybody else I've missed? Anything else that? There are still 37 participants, so we haven't made everybody go to sleep yet.
There's another question.
Great.
Danielle.
Where is it? Help me find it. Where is it at?
It's in the Q&A. Has it been looked at for a smaller satellite type system that could make the business district more viable in Detroit?
So I'm going to ask Peter to help me out on that one.
Yeah, so I think what that is asking is, have a treatment system just for the business district and not the residential. That has not been a component of our evaluation, but I know that has been in the past in other studies. So I can definitely vouch for that, but it hasn't been a specific evaluation. We're looking more economy of scale and hopefully getting more users than less. Having a smaller remote system is tougher to get that economy of scale. So, and sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I would also add, even if you just look at the business district, and Peter, don't let me say anything incorrect here, but if you're only looking at the business district in Detroit, you still need a place to take that water to, right? You still need some type of infiltration. You still need, and that eats up into your business district. And so something that would, typically benefit it would not, because then you're, again, that economies of scale, you're then basing it on maybe 5 to 10 businesses. Those are expensive infrastructure for 5 to 10 businesses.
Can I add something, Danielle, that was looked at and the cost was extreme and the businesses didn't want to get involved.
Yeah, which is why we're looking at how do we get the most amount of people, the needs that they have. To me, this is a legacy project, right? This is a project where, people that are investing right now in the Detroit, Idana, Gates, Mill City areas, they want something to be able to hand down to their kids and not just a problem. And if we can get this right, it becomes an asset, a financial asset for those communities for a lifetime.
I also like to add that all the members of the board have put in lots of hours and are looking at all the communities and their needs. And they're trying to, everybody's on the same page to make this affordable. And they have put in a lot of time and they deserve a lot of credit.
And I think that's the biggest goal is, right? How do we get the highest quality of water? How do we make it work? And then how do we make it as affordable as possible in those communities? Looks like there's one other question that popped up. One of the members of the authority does have an appointment to talk with FEMA representative tomorrow, specifically for funding for the sewer build and to facilitate economic development in that. So thank you very much for that. That does help. If you need some talking points, Shelley or whoever that is, please let me know and I'm happy to accommodate. It looks like we are coming up on 7:30. Are there additional questions that we can answer? And did this help? Did this provide the information that I can't answer all the questions yet, but we just want to, it's hard with a webinar. We don't get to see your faces, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that any of the panelists need to say?
Thank you for your input and your comments.
And if there are more comments, I would suggest please go to the website, North Santiam Sewer Authority.net. And under the contact us, you can actually just hit that. It goes directly to our email and make it nice and easy. So if you have additional comments that you thought about later or a question that came up later, we will again do our best to answer those questions.
And John just
Danielle.
asked when we'll have another town hall. It's in the May timeframe. Despite my typo in the one slide, it's in the May timeframe is what we're looking at for the next town hall meeting.
And if I could offer and remind everyone, first Thursday of the month is the monthly sewer authority meeting. So that's a great place, particularly with Zoom, for people to be able to tune in. We keep it to 2 hours and to stay in touch. There's some housekeeping that goes on, but that's another great place to be able just to know how it's moving each month.
And everybody's welcome.
Mhm. Always, always. Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
Thank you. 7:30. Thank you, everybody, for sticking in. We
Thank you.
appreciate all of the comments and questions. Have a wonderful night.
Bye.
Everyone.